I need to tell you about something that happened at my son's wedding that changed everything. Something that could happen to any family, anywhere, at any time. It was supposed to be the perfect day. Kevin was getting married to Samantha at this beautiful venue near Newport Beach. Everything looked like a fairy tale. White linens, crystal glasses, ocean breeze. The kind of wedding you see in magazines. I was sitting at table 7 with my 7-year-old grandson Tyler. He was wearing his little navy suit, looking so handsome. But then something happened that no grandmother ever expects to deal with. Tyler squeezed my hand so tight it almost hurt. His whole body was shaking. There were real tears in his eyes. Fear. Genuine distress. "Grandma Dorothy," he whispered, "I want to go home right now. Can we please leave?" Now Tyler isn't the type to get overwhelmed at family events. He's mature for his age. So when I saw that look in his eyes, I knew something was seriously wrong. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, and that's when he said the words that made my blood run cold. "You haven't looked under the table yet." What? Tyler had discovered under our table at his father's wedding reception was something no child should ever have to see. Something that turned a day of celebration into every parent's worst nightmare. "My name is Dorothy. Dorothy Mae Henderson. I've been living here in Orange County for 43 years now. Can you believe that? 43 years. Time just flies by, doesn't it? I came here from Ohio back in 1982. My husband Frank, God rest his soul, got transferred to his company's office in Irvine. We packed up everything we owned and drove across the country with our son Kevin. He was just a teenager then. We settled in Mission Viejo. Nice little 3-bedroom house. Nothing fancy, but it was home. Frank passed away 8 years ago now. Heart attack. Just like that, he was gone. But I stayed here in Orange County. This is where all my memories are. Where my life is. Where my family is. You know how it is when you get to be my age. You don't want to start over somewhere new. I'm 68 now, and I've got my routines down pat. Sunday mornings, you'll find me at Saddleback Community Church in Costa Mesa. Same pew I've been sitting in for 22 years. I like the consistency of it. The hymns remind me of simpler times. Monday mornings, I do my grocery shopping at the Albertsons on El Toro Road. Sometimes I stop by Trader Joe's afterward. They have the best coffee, and those frozen meals are perfect for someone living alone. Tuesday afternoons, I volunteer at the church food pantry. It breaks your heart sometimes, seeing families struggling to put food on the table. Especially here in Orange County where everything costs so much. A modest apartment can cost more than most people make in a month. Wednesday evenings, I go to Bible study. There's a group of us ladies who've been meeting for years. We've become like family to each other. Thursday mornings, I take my walk along Newport Beach Pier. Doctor's orders after my little heart episode 2 years ago. Nothing serious, just a warning to slow down a bit. I love breathing in that salt air and watching the fishing boats head out for their daily catch. Friday afternoons, I pick up my prescriptions at CVS. The pharmacist there has known me for years. Always asks about Kevin and Tyler. Saturday mornings are for housework and laundry. Saturday evenings are usually quiet. A good book and a cup of tea. That's my speed these days. But today is different. Today is special. Today is Kevin's wedding day. His second wedding, actually. He divorced Jennifer 2 years ago. It was hard on everyone, especially Tyler. That's my grandson. He's 7 years old now. The sweetest little boy you've ever seen. So today I'm sitting here at this beautiful wedding venue near Newport Beach. Kevin is marrying Samantha Richards. She's a lovely woman. Really lovely. Comes from good Orange County family. Her family owns a successful real estate business in Laguna Hills. They insisted on paying for this whole wedding. And let me tell you, they went all out. This place is gorgeous. One of those elegant clubhouses that overlooks the water. You can feel the ocean breeze even inside the reception hall. The kind of place where weddings cost more than I made in 6 months when I was working at Pacific Bell. But Samantha's family wanted their daughter to have the wedding of her dreams. White linens everywhere. Probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Crystal glasses that catch the afternoon sunlight coming through these floor-to-ceiling windows. Fresh flowers on every table. They smell like springtime. Like new beginnings. There's a professional photographer here. He's been following Kevin and Samantha around all day. Keeps talking about capturing magical moments. The reception hall is packed. About 150 guests. Nice mix of both families. Kevin's friends from his engineering firm. Samantha's friends from her real estate office. There's a DJ over by the dance floor playing classic hits from the 70s and 80s. The kind of music that makes people my age feel young again. Gets everyone singing along. Look at that dessert station. It's like something from a fancy hotel. 3 different kinds of wedding cake. A chocolate fountain with fresh strawberries and marshmallows. Those little French pastries that look too pretty to eat. There's even a photo booth in the corner. Guests have been taking silly pictures with props all evening. Big sunglasses, feather boas, signs that say things like "love is in the air." Outside, they've got valet service handling all these luxury cars. BMWs, Mercedes, Teslas. This is Orange County, after all. Through the windows, I can see guests already calling their Ubers and Lyfts. Planning their rides home. Everything looks absolutely perfect. Like something straight out of those wedding magazines Samantha was always showing me during the planning. I'm sitting at table 7 with Tyler. Kevin's boy from his first marriage. He's wearing this adorable little navy suit with a white shirt and clip-on tie. Makes him look like a tiny businessman. His sandy brown hair is combed to the side with just a touch of gel. His dress shoes are polished to a shine. His grandfather Frank would have been so proud. Jennifer dropped him off this morning looking so handsome. But I could tell he was nervous. Weddings can be overwhelming for kids. All these adults in fancy clothes. Loud music. Expectations to behave perfectly for hours on end. Tyler's always been mature for his age. Had to be, really. The divorce was hard on him. Kids learn to read situations when their world gets turned upside down. They develop radar for adult emotions. For tension. Tyler's been sitting quietly next to me. Sipping his apple juice. Picking at his chicken fingers and French fries. The other kids are running around, playing tag near the dance floor. But Tyler likes to stay close to the adults he trusts. That's when it happened. He reached over and squeezed my hand so tight I thought he might cut off my circulation. His whole body started shaking against me. I turned to look at him and saw these tears in his eyes. Real tears. Not the fake kind kids produce when they want something. These were tears from fear. From genuine distress. "Grandma Dorothy," he whispered. His voice was so quiet I had to lean down close to hear him over the music and conversation. "I want to go home right now. Can we please leave?" Now that caught me completely off guard. Tyler isn't usually the type to get overwhelmed. He's been to church services with me since he was tiny. Birthday parties. Family gatherings. He generally handles himself well around adults. If anything, Tyler's the kind of child who observes quietly and adapts. The divorce taught him that. Flexibility and good behavior became survival skills when adults make decisions that turn your world upside down. My heart just broke seeing him like this. But I knew I had to stay calm. Figure out what was causing this reaction before I could help him. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, keeping my voice as gentle as I could. I stroked his hair with my free hand. "Are you feeling sick? Do you need the bathroom? Want to step outside for some fresh air?" These are my go-to solutions for childhood distress. Usually solve most problems. But Tyler shook his head quickly to each suggestion. That told me this wasn't about physical discomfort. This wasn't sensory overload from the wedding noise. He looked around the reception hall with this careful, systematic observation. Like a security guard checking for threats. Or a detective examining a crime scene. The fear in his brown eyes just kept getting deeper. More intense. His breathing was getting faster and shallower. Like he might work himself up to a panic attack. I've seen this look on Tyler's face before. Usually when he's worried about disappointing adults. Or when he's discovered something he knows is wrong but doesn't know how to handle. It's the look of a child who's stumbled onto adult problems. Who realizes he's in over his head. Who doesn't know how to ask for help without getting someone in trouble. "Grandma," he said again. This time his voice had that quality that makes every protective instinct I have stand at full alert. The tone that says something is seriously wrong. Not just uncomfortable. Not inconvenient. Actually dangerous. Inappropriate. In ways a 7-year-old shouldn't have to deal with. "You haven't looked under the table yet." The way he said those words made my blood run cold. I haven't felt like this since Kevin was small and came home with that look. You know the look. When they've witnessed something terrible at school. Or overheard adult conversations they shouldn't be exposed to. There was something about Tyler's tone. Something urgent and frightened. Almost desperate. This wasn't about dropped food. This wasn't about spilled drinks. This wasn't about any minor mishap that happens at wedding receptions. This was about something that genuinely scared him. Something his young mind recognized as wrong even if he didn't have words to explain why. I felt that familiar grandmother instinct kicking in. The one that's guided me through decades of child-rearing. The one that's helped me navigate countless situations where children needed protection. Guidance. Someone to advocate for them. I've been going to Saddleback Church for 22 years. Sitting in the same pews. Participating in the same worship rituals. Over those decades, I've heard countless sermons about trusting that small voice inside your head. About having courage to speak up when something doesn't feel right. About protecting the innocent. Especially children who can't always protect themselves. Right now, that small voice inside my head isn't just speaking. It's shouting at me to pay attention. To take Tyler seriously. I scanned the reception hall with new eyes. Trying to see what Tyler might be seeing. Kevin was at the head table with Samantha and the wedding party. All of them glowing with happiness. Laughing at stories from the best man and maid of honor. Samantha looked absolutely radiant in her designer dress. Gracious smiles. Elegant gestures. Accepting congratulations from guests. She's everything I could have hoped for in a daughter-in-law. Kind. Intelligent. Clearly devoted to Kevin. Successful career. And she's developed such a warm relationship with Tyler over this past year. The photographer was moving around with his equipment. Capturing candid moments. Laughter. Dancing. The general joy that fills successful wedding receptions. The children's table nearby had 3 other kids from the family. Cousins. Family friends around Tyler's age. They were eating their special meals. Playing with the favor bags full of candy and stickers and tiny toys. Everything looked completely normal. Exactly what you'd expect from an expensive Orange County wedding. Every detail carefully planned. Every element designed to create a perfect day. The servers were professional. The venue staff was managing logistics smoothly. Music at appropriate volume. The atmosphere was pure joy and celebration and family unity. But Tyler's hand in mine was still shaking. With that intensity that told me he was genuinely afraid. Now I noticed his eyes kept darting down toward the floor. Underneath our table. Like he was checking to make sure something was still there. Or hadn't moved from where he first discovered it. What exactly is under the table, honey? I asked as quietly as possible. Leaning down so my mouth was close to his ear. Making sure my voice wouldn't carry to nearby tables. I didn't want to alarm him further by making a scene. But I needed to understand what triggered such a strong fear response in a child who's generally calm and adaptable. He looked down at his lap for a long moment. Like he was gathering courage. Trying to figure out how to explain something he didn't fully understand himself. Then he looked back up at me with those big brown eyes. They reminded me so much of Kevin at that age. When he was struggling to find words for complex emotions. There's a phone down there, Grandma. It's not where phones usually go. It keeps buzzing and the screen keeps lighting up with pictures. And I think the pictures are of people without clothes on. Those words hit me like a physical blow. I had to work so hard to keep my face neutral. Keep my voice calm. Even though every alarm bell in my head was ringing at full volume. A hidden phone showing inappropriate images. Positioned under a table where children are sitting. At a family wedding where everyone should feel safe and protected. This is exactly the kind of predatory behavior we read about in news articles. The kind we hear warnings about in church safety meetings. The nightmare every parent and grandparent hopes they'll never encounter. My first instinct was to look under the table immediately. Confirm what Tyler had seen. But I forced myself to move slowly. Carefully. I didn't want to alarm him further. And I didn't want to tip off whoever might be responsible for putting that phone there. Without making it obvious, I dropped my cloth napkin on the floor. Used retrieving it as cover to glance under our table. Sure enough. There was a smartphone wedged between one of the table legs and the wall. Partially hidden by the long white tablecloth. But still visible if you knew where to look. Or if you were a curious child who dropped something. The phone looked deliberately positioned. Not accidentally dropped. Tucked into a spot where adults wouldn't notice. But children playing under the table might find it. The screen was dark when I looked. But even as I watched, it lit up with what looked like a text notification. I could see the wallpaper was something that definitely looked inappropriate for a family setting. My stomach dropped. My hands started shaking. The full implications began sinking in. Someone at this wedding reception had access to the venue, access to seating arrangements. And they deliberately placed a device with inappropriate content where children might find it. Where children could be exposed to material that might traumatize them. Or worse. I sat back up with my napkin. Tyler tugged on my sleeve with desperate urgency. "Did you see it, Grandma? Did you see the phone?" I could hear in his voice that he'd been carrying this burden alone. He was desperate for an adult to acknowledge that what he discovered was real. Was concerning. I was trying to tie my shoelace earlier. It came undone during the ceremony. When I bent down, I saw it there. The screen kept showing different pictures. But I don't think the people in the pictures were wearing any clothes. It made me feel scared and sick to my stomach. But I didn't know if I should tell anyone. I thought maybe I would get in trouble for looking at something I wasn't supposed to see. The innocent confusion and self-blame in his voice broke my heart. This is exactly how predators operate. They create situations where children feel guilty when they're actually victims of manipulation. I reached over and gently stroked Tyler's hair, trying to project calm even though my mind was racing with concern and anger. "Tyler, sweetheart, you did absolutely nothing wrong," I told him firmly, making sure he could hear the certainty in my voice. "You were just tying your shoe. That's perfectly normal. And when you saw something that made you uncomfortable, you did exactly the right thing. You told me instead of trying to handle it yourself. Instead of keeping it secret. I am so proud of you for being brave enough to come to me." I paused to make sure he was really hearing me. Really understanding. It was crucial that he not internalize any shame about this. "Now I need you to stay right here next to me while I take care of this. I'm going to make sure that phone gets removed. Make sure no other children have to see those pictures. But I need you to try not to worry anymore. The adults are going to handle everything from here. Can you do that for me?" He nodded solemnly. I could see some tension leaving his shoulders now that he'd shared his burden. Now that someone believed him and was taking action. But I could also see he was still scared. Still processing what he'd been exposed to. Probably wondering about questions a 7-year-old shouldn't have to think about. "Grandma, why would someone put a phone like that where kids might find it? Was someone trying to trick us or hurt us?" The questions were heartbreakingly mature. Perceptive. They showed Tyler understood on some level that this wasn't an accident. This was deliberate action by an adult with bad intentions. "Some adults make very poor choices, sweetheart," I told him, trying to give an age-appropriate explanation that acknowledged the seriousness without giving him more frightening details than he could handle. "Sometimes those poor choices can hurt children even when that's not what they meant to do. But here's what's important to remember. You were smart and brave. You told a trusted adult immediately. Now we're going to make sure this doesn't happen to other children. That's how families work together. How communities keep everyone safe." While I was talking, I was also scanning the reception hall with new eyes. Looking for anyone watching our table. Anyone checking their phone frequently. Anyone displaying behavior that might connect them to the device Tyler found. I excused myself from the table. Told Tyler I needed to visit the ladies' room. Asked him to save my seat and maybe eat a few more bites while I was gone. But instead of heading to the bathroom, I walked with purposeful calm toward the kitchen area. That's where I'd noticed the wedding coordinator managing logistics all evening. Her name is Michelle. I remember meeting her at the rehearsal dinner last night. She's probably in her 30s. Very professional. The kind of person who carries herself with confidence. She's been moving around all evening with her clipboard and headset. Coordinating with catering staff, the photographer, the DJ. Making sure every detail of Kevin and Samantha's day goes perfectly. Most importantly, she seems like someone who would handle a sensitive situation without causing drama. "Excuse me, Michelle," I said quietly when I reached her station. Making sure my voice was calm despite the urgency I felt inside. "I wonder if you could help me with something that requires discretion. There seems to be a phone under one of the guest tables. I'm concerned it might belong to someone looking for it. But there's also a more serious issue I need to discuss privately." Her professional manner immediately shifted to focused attention. She set down her clipboard to give me her complete concentration. "Of course, Mrs. Henderson. I'm always available to help with concerns. Which table are we talking about? And what kind of serious issue?" I appreciated that she didn't dismiss my concerns. Didn't suggest I was overreacting. Unfortunately, that's been my experience sometimes with younger people when older adults report problems. Table 7, where I'm seated with my grandson. The phone appears to have been placed there intentionally, not dropped accidentally. And it contains inappropriate content that my 7-year-old grandson saw when he was tying his shoe. Michelle's expression became grave immediately. She nodded with understanding that told me she'd dealt with similar situations before. Or at least received training on how to handle them. That's definitely something we need to address immediately, she said. Both for your grandson's well-being and for the safety of other children present. Let me get venue security involved right away. We'll handle this as discreetly as possible so we don't disrupt the celebration. She pulled out her radio. Spoke quietly using professional codes I didn't understand. But they clearly communicated urgency without broadcasting details other guests might overhear. Within minutes, a security guard appeared at Michelle's side. Middle-aged man in a dark suit. He managed to look both authoritative and non-threatening at the same time. Michelle quickly briefed him in low tones. I could see from his expression that he immediately grasped the seriousness of what we were dealing with. Ma'am, he said, addressing me with respect I appreciated. I'm going to need you to show me exactly where this device is located. Then we'll secure it as potential evidence while we investigate how it got there and who might be responsible. Is your grandson still at the table? I confirmed Tyler was still at table 7. Probably wondering where I was and why I was taking so long in the bathroom. I don't want to frighten him any further, I explained. He's been very brave about reporting this to me. But he's also confused and scared. I think the less drama we create around the table, the better for his emotional well-being. Michelle and the security guard exchanged a look that told me they'd handled similar situations. They understood the importance of protecting children from additional trauma while conducting thorough investigations. We'll be as low-key as possible, the security guard assured me. But I need to retrieve that device immediately. Both to prevent other children from exposure and to preserve evidence that might help identify the person responsible. We walked back toward table 7. Moving casually. Making small talk about the wedding to avoid drawing attention from other guests. Tyler looked up anxiously when he saw me approaching with 2 adults. I could tell he was worried he might be in trouble despite my earlier reassurances. I sat down next to him. Gently squeezed his hand while Michelle and the security guard positioned themselves around our table. Remember what I told you about how proud I am of you for telling me about the phone, I whispered. These nice people are here to take care of the situation. Just like I promised. The security guard crouched down to Tyler's eye level, demonstrating child-friendly approach that told me he'd received proper training with young witnesses. Hey there, buddy, he said in a warm voice. Your grandma told me you found something under the table that made you uncomfortable. That was really smart of you to tell her instead of trying to handle it yourself. Adults should handle adult problems. You did exactly the right thing by going to someone you trust. Tyler nodded solemnly. I could see that having his actions validated by another authority figure was helping him feel more confident about his decision to report what he found. The security guard continued in that same gentle tone. Professional but reassuring. Never talking down to Tyler or treating him like he was too young to understand. We're going to take care of removing that phone so no other children have to see those inappropriate pictures. We might need to ask you a few questions later to help us figure out how it got there. Nothing scary or complicated. Just things like what time you first noticed it. Whether you saw anyone near your table acting strangely. But all that can wait until after you've had time to enjoy the rest of your dad's wedding party. Tyler seemed to relax at this explanation. Though I could tell he was still processing everything. Probably had dozens of questions he didn't know how to ask yet. The security guard turned to me with a more serious expression. Ma'am, I need to speak with you privately in a few minutes to get additional details and discuss next steps. But first, is there another family member who could sit with Tyler? I want to make sure he's supervised by someone he trusts. Make sure he doesn't feel abandoned while we handle logistics. I looked around the reception hall. Immediately spotted Kevin's sister Lisa at table 6. Close enough that Tyler and I could see each other throughout any conversation. Lisa has always been wonderful with Tyler. Patient and playful and nurturing. Natural with children. She was currently chatting with some of Kevin's college friends. But I knew she'd be happy to help if I explained I needed her to watch Tyler for a few minutes. "Tyler, honey," I said, getting his attention by touching his shoulder. "Would you feel comfortable going to sit with Aunt Lisa for a little while? She's right there at the next table. You'll be able to see me the whole time while I talk to these people about the phone situation." Tyler looked uncertain for a moment, glancing between me and Lisa's table, torn between wanting to stay close and not wanting to seem like a baby who couldn't handle separation from his grandmother. "Will you come back soon? Will you tell me what happens with the bad phone?" he asked. I could hear in his voice that he needed concrete reassurances about timeline and outcomes. "I promise I'll be back in less than 10 minutes. And I promise I'll tell you exactly what's happening. In words that make sense to you. As soon as I have more information," I told him firmly. "And if you need me for any reason while I'm talking to security, you just wave at me. I'll come right back. Okay?" This satisfied his need for control in what had become unpredictable. Lisa noticed us looking her way. Came over with her warm smile that always makes children feel welcome. "Hey there, handsome nephew of mine," she said with genuine affection. "Want to come check out the dessert table with me? I think I saw some mini chocolate eclairs. The ones you love. Maybe we can grab extra cookies to take home later." The mention of dessert perked Tyler up considerably. As I knew it would. He agreed to go with Lisa as long as he could still see me from wherever they went. "Just stay in the main reception hall where I can see you," I told Lisa quietly. "Maybe keep conversation light and fun while I handle a small situation with venue management." Lisa gave me a look that said she sensed more was going on. But she was wise enough not to press for details in front of Tyler. "Come on, buddy," she said, offering Tyler her hand. "Let's investigate those desserts. Maybe find some good people watching spots where we can guess what adults are talking about at their fancy tables." As Tyler walked away with Lisa, holding her hand and already looking more relaxed, I felt relief and apprehension about the conversation ahead. Relief that Tyler was safe with someone loving and trustworthy. Apprehension about what investigation might reveal. About who was responsible for exposing my grandson to inappropriate content. Michelle and the security guard guided me to a quiet corner of the reception hall, near the large windows overlooking the ocean, where we could have private conversation without being overheard. The security guard, who introduced himself as Robert, pulled out a notebook and pen, indicating he'd be taking detailed notes. "Mrs. Henderson, I need to tell you that the phone your grandson discovered contains very disturbing content," he began. Voice professional but clearly concerned. "The images are definitely inappropriate for children. The fact that the device was deliberately hidden under a table where children are seated suggests this was placed intentionally. By someone who wanted children to find it." My worst fears were being confirmed. I felt nausea wash over me thinking about what could have happened. What if Tyler hadn't been brave enough to tell me? What if other children had discovered the phone? What if they'd been exposed to whatever terrible images it contained? "You mean someone at this wedding deliberately put that phone there? Someone with access to this venue? Hoping children would find it and see those pictures?" I asked, even though I knew the answer from their grave expressions. "Based on positioning and content type, yes, that appears to be exactly what happened," Robert confirmed grimly. "This kind of predatory behavior is unfortunately more common than most people realize. Wedding receptions can be attractive targets. They bring together multiple families with children in celebratory atmosphere where people let their guard down. The perpetrator probably assumed children would be playing under tables, dropping things, moving around unsupervised." Michelle added, "We've already contacted local law enforcement. They're sending detectives who specialize in this type of case. Should be here within 20 minutes. But they'll be in plainclothes. Try to blend in with wedding guests so we don't disrupt celebration or alert whoever is responsible that we've discovered their device." I appreciated their professionalism. Their sensitivity to the fact this was Kevin's wedding day. But I felt overwhelmed by implications of what they were telling me. How do we figure out who did this? Could it be another guest? Someone on catering staff? A venue employee? Robert flipped through several pages in his notebook, clearly referencing information he'd already gathered. "We're going to start by reviewing security footage from venue cameras. They cover most of the reception area. We'll look for anyone near table 7 during setup or early reception. Anyone who appeared to be placing objects under tables. Anyone whose behavior seemed unusual or suspicious. We'll also interview catering staff, venue employees, anyone else who had access before guests arrived. The methodical approach was reassuring. But I couldn't help thinking about how many people had been in and out of this reception hall today. How many opportunities someone would have had to place that phone. How difficult it might be to identify the perpetrator among so many potential suspects. What about Tyler? I asked, voicing the concern weighing on me throughout this conversation. Will he need to be interviewed by police? Will this become public matter that affects Kevin's wedding or Tyler's privacy? Michelle and Robert exchanged another look that told me they'd discussed these issues. Had a plan for handling them sensitively. The detectives will want to speak briefly with Tyler at some point, Robert explained. But that can be arranged at your convenience. In a child-friendly environment. As for publicity, we have no intention of making this public unless it becomes necessary for prosecution. Our goal is to identify and remove the threat while letting the wedding celebration continue normally. As if summoned by our conversation, I looked across the reception hall and saw Kevin walking toward us. His face creased with concern. Lisa must have told him I was having some meeting with venue staff. Knowing my son, he was probably worried about catering problems, music issues, some aspect of his wedding day he felt responsible for managing. "Mom, is everything okay over here?" he asked as he approached our group. "Lisa mentioned you needed to speak with venue management about something. I wanted to make sure there wasn't a problem I should know about." I looked at this man I raised. So handsome and happy in his wedding tuxedo. Enjoying what should be one of the most joyful days of his life. I made a split-second decision about how much to share right now. On one hand, Tyler is his son. Kevin has a right to know about anything affecting Tyler's safety. On the other hand, today is Kevin's wedding day. He's surrounded by guests and responsibilities. There's nothing he can practically do that isn't already being handled by professionals. There was a small incident involving Tyler that venue security is handling, I told him. Choosing words carefully to be truthful without being alarming. Nothing that requires you to leave your reception or worry about right now. Tyler is fine. He's safe. I'll fill you in on all details tomorrow when you have time to process information properly. Kevin's frown deepened. I could see he was torn between trusting my judgment and his natural parental instinct to know immediately about anything affecting his son. "Mom, if something happened to Tyler, I need to know right now. Not tomorrow. Is he hurt? Is he upset? Did someone say something inappropriate to him?" Before I could answer, Samantha appeared at Kevin's side. Looking radiant and slightly concerned as she slipped her arm through his. "Kevin, honey, your college friends are asking for you at the photo booth. The photographer wants more pictures of us with both sets of parents before people start leaving." She glanced curiously at our group in the corner. Clearly sensing some serious conversation was happening. But also focused on managing their wedding reception. "Is everything all right? Can I help with anything?" Robert stepped forward smoothly. Displaying diplomatic skills that probably made him effective at his job. "Everything is under control. No need for either of you to be concerned right now. We're just handling a minor venue issue that came to your mother's attention. We wanted to address it properly. Please go ahead and enjoy your celebration. We'll follow up with your family tomorrow if necessary." Kevin still looked skeptical. But Samantha's gentle pressure on his arm and mention of waiting photographers seemed to tip scales toward returning to wedding festivities rather than pressing for details about a situation apparently being handled by competent adults. "Kevin," I said firmly, using the tone I'd perfected over decades of motherhood. The one that still carried authority even now that he was a grown man with his own family. "I promise you that Tyler is completely safe. That appropriate people are handling whatever needs handling. That this will not interfere with your wedding celebration in any way. Tomorrow morning, when you have time to sit down and listen properly, I'll tell you everything you need to know. But right now, your job is to be a happy groom. Enjoy this beautiful reception Samantha's family worked so hard to create." Something in my tone must have convinced him I was serious about both the safety aspect and the timing. His expression relaxed slightly and he nodded. Though I could tell he was filing this conversation away for follow-up tomorrow. "Okay, Mom. But if you need me for anything at all, you come find me immediately. Make sure Tyler knows that too." Samantha smiled gratefully at me. Understanding I'd just helped preserve their wedding day from whatever complication was threatening to intrude. "Thank you, Dorothy." Please let us know if there's anything we can do to help with whatever situation you're managing. They walked back toward the main reception area. Kevin glanced over his shoulder once to make sure Tyler was visible and apparently content with Lisa at the dessert table. As soon as they were out of earshot, Robert pulled out his radio again. Spoke quietly, apparently coordinating with law enforcement officers who should be arriving soon. The detectives are here, he reported to Michelle and me. They're going to enter through the side door. Position themselves around the reception hall to observe guests and staff while we brief them on what we know so far. True to their word, over the next few minutes I noticed several new faces in the reception hall. People dressed appropriately for a wedding celebration but carrying themselves with alert professionalism that identified them as law enforcement even when trying to blend in. One of them approached our corner. A woman in her 40s wearing a navy blue dress that could belong to any wedding guest. She introduced herself quietly as Detective Sarah Martinez. Mrs. Henderson, I understand your grandson discovered a device containing inappropriate material that appears to have been placed deliberately under your table. I want to start by saying how proud you should be of him for reporting this immediately. And how smart you were to bring it to venue security's attention right away. Her warm, professional manner immediately put me at ease. I could tell she had extensive experience dealing with situations involving children and families. Can you walk me through exactly what Tyler told you and when? Then show me precisely where the device was located. I recounted the entire sequence of events. From Tyler's initial distress and request to leave the reception, through his revelation about the phone under the table, to my discovery of the device and subsequent conversations with Michelle and Robert. Detective Martinez took detailed notes. Asked clarifying questions about Tyler's emotional state, the exact timing of events, my observations about other guests or staff who might have been near our table. When I finished my account, she reviewed her notes. Looked up at me with an expression that was both reassuring and serious. Based on what you've told me and what we've observed from the device itself, this appears to be a deliberate attempt to expose children to inappropriate content. Which is a serious crime. We're going to conduct a thorough investigation. But I want you to know that Tyler's quick thinking and your immediate response probably prevented other children from being victimized. She paused and glanced around the reception hall. The wedding celebration was continuing normally with no indication guests were aware of law enforcement presence. We've already begun reviewing security footage from the venue's cameras. We should have preliminary results within the next hour or two. The next 90 minutes passed in a strange blur of parallel realities. On one level, Kevin and Samantha's wedding reception continued exactly as planned. Toasts and dancing and cake cutting. All the joyful rituals that mark successful celebrations. Guests laughing and mingling and taking photos. The DJ playing music that got people singing along. The overall atmosphere was happiness and family unity, but on another level, a quiet investigation was taking place around the edges. Plainclothes detectives discreetly interviewing catering staff, venue employees, anyone else who had access to the reception hall during setup. Tyler stayed close to Lisa throughout this period. I could see her warm, distracting conversation was helping him feel more normal, less anxious about the situation. He waved at me periodically from across the reception hall. I waved back with what I hoped was a reassuring smile that communicated everything was under control. About 2 hours after the investigation began, Detective Martinez approached me again with information she was clearly eager to share. Mrs. Henderson, we've identified the individual who placed the device. I need to prepare you for this news because it may be surprising. My heart started racing as I imagined possibilities. Could it be someone from Kevin's side of the family? Someone from Samantha's family? A friend or colleague they'd trusted with their special day? It wasn't a guest, Detective Martinez continued. I immediately felt relief that this wasn't someone Kevin and Samantha knew and trusted. It was a member of the temporary catering staff. Someone who was hired just for today's event through a staffing agency. He has a history of this type of behavior. He's done this before at other events where children were present. Detective Martinez continued her explanation in the same calm, professional tone that had characterized all her interactions with me. The individual's name is Marcus Webb. He's 28 years old. He was hired by the catering company through a temporary staffing agency that apparently didn't conduct thorough background checks. We discovered he has 2 previous arrests for similar behavior at other events. though he was never convicted because evidence was insufficient or victims' families chose not to pursue prosecution. I felt this mixture of relief and horror as she provided these details. Relief because this wasn't someone Kevin or Samantha knew personally, which meant no betrayal of trust within their social circle or family network. Horror because this predator had apparently been allowed to continue working at events where children are present, moving from venue to venue, family celebration to family celebration, looking for opportunities to victimize young people. How did you identify him so quickly? I asked, genuinely curious about the investigative process that led to such rapid results. The security footage was very helpful, Detective Martinez explained. The venue has cameras positioned throughout the reception hall and kitchen areas. We were able to track his movements during the setup period. We saw him approach your table area multiple times. On one occasion we clearly observed him placing an object under the table, then looking around to make sure he wasn't being watched. She flipped through her notebook and showed me a timestamp notation. This occurred approximately 45 minutes before guests were seated for dinner, which means the device was in place for over 2 hours before your grandson discovered it. During that time, other children could potentially have found it, which makes Tyler's quick reporting even more significant. The timeline made me feel sick to my stomach, thinking about all the ways this situation could have been worse. All the other children who could have been exposed to inappropriate content. All the families who could have had their celebration ruined by this predator's actions. Where is he now? I asked, wanting to make sure Marcus Webb was no longer anywhere near the wedding reception or any children present. He's in custody, Detective Martinez confirmed. We arrested him about 30 minutes ago as he was cleaning up in the kitchen area. He's being transported to county jail where he'll be held pending formal charges. The efficiency and professionalism of the law enforcement response was impressive. But I couldn't help wondering about all the other events where Marcus Webb had worked. All the other families who might have been victimized without ever knowing it. All the children who might have been exposed to inappropriate material without having Tyler's courage to report what they'd seen. Will this have to become public knowledge? Will there be news coverage or court proceedings that might affect Tyler's privacy or Kevin's reputation? Detective Martinez nodded understandingly. These cases are typically handled with great sensitivity to protect victims, especially when children are involved. Tyler's name will not be released publicly. While there may eventually be court proceedings if the case goes to trial, every effort will be made to minimize impact on your family. The focus will be on Marcus Webb's pattern of behavior, his violation of laws designed to protect children, not on specific details of what happened at this wedding. I appreciated her reassurance. But I also knew Tyler would need ongoing support to process what he experienced today. Kevin and Samantha would need to understand what happened so they could help Tyler heal from this trauma. What happens next in terms of Tyler's involvement in the investigation? Detective Martinez closed her notebook and looked directly at me with eye contact that conveyed both respect and concern. We'll need to conduct a formal interview with Tyler within the next few days. But it will be done by specialists trained to work with children. It will take place in a comfortable, non-threatening environment. The interview will be brief and focused on factual details rather than emotional processing, which should be handled by a qualified counselor if Tyler shows signs of ongoing distress about what he witnessed. She paused to let this information sink in. Based on what you've told me about his maturity and his ability to articulate what he experienced, I don't expect the interview process to be traumatic for him. Especially since he had such a positive experience with reporting the incident to you and seeing that adults took his concerns seriously. As we were talking, I noticed the wedding reception had begun to wind down naturally. Some guests already saying goodbyes and heading to the valet stand, calling for rideshare pickups. Kevin and Samantha were still glowing with happiness, completely unaware of the drama that had been unfolding around the edges of their celebration. Tyler was still with Lisa. From what I could observe across the reception hall, he seemed to have recovered much of his usual energy and curiosity. Probably because Lisa had done such an excellent job keeping him entertained and distracted. Detective Martinez handed me her business card with her direct phone number written on the back. Please call me if Tyler has any questions or concerns over the next few days. Or if you think of any additional details that might be helpful to the investigation. And please don't hesitate to reach out if you need referrals to child psychologists who specialize in helping children. process these kinds of experiences. I appreciated her thoroughness and sensitivity to Tyler's ongoing needs. But I also felt exhausted by the emotional weight of everything that had happened today. Detective Martinez, can I ask you something? How often does this kind of thing happen? Are wedding receptions and family celebrations common targets for this type of predatory behavior? Her expression became even more serious. Unfortunately, it happens more often than most people realize. Predators look for opportunities to access children in settings where parents and grandparents are relaxed, not maintaining their usual level of vigilance. Wedding receptions, birthday parties, church events, school functions, she continued. Anywhere that brings together multiple families with children can be attractive to someone with malicious intentions. She paused to let the sobering information sink in. The good news is that cases like Tyler's are becoming more common, where children immediately report inappropriate situations to trusted adults. We're doing a better job of teaching kids about personal safety, encouraging them to speak up when something doesn't feel right. I thought about all the conversations I've had with Tyler over the years about stranger danger, about trusting his instincts when adults make him feel uncomfortable, about the difference between secrets that are fun to keep and secrets that make him feel scared or confused. Today proved those conversations were worth having. The time I'd invested in building trust and open communication with him had paid off in the most important way possible. Will Marcus Webb be prosecuted to the full extent of the law? I asked, wanting to know there would be real consequences for his actions, that he wouldn't be able to continue victimizing children at other events. Based on the evidence we've collected and his previous arrests, I'm confident the district attorney will pursue serious charges, Detective Martinez confirmed. The fact that this was clearly premeditated, that he specifically targeted a location where children would be seated, and that he has a pattern of this behavior will all work against him in court. He's looking at potential felony charges that could result in significant prison time and mandatory registration as a sex offender. While I was glad to hear justice would be served, I couldn't help thinking about all the other temporary workers, all the other catering staff, all the other vendors who have access to family celebrations without proper background checks or supervision. What can families do to protect themselves from this kind of situation in the future? Detective Martinez considered the question carefully before responding. The most important thing is what you and Tyler demonstrated today. Maintaining open communication with children. Teaching them to trust their instincts. Encouraging them to report anything that makes them feel uncomfortable, even if they're not sure it's important. Beyond that, families can ask venues and catering companies about their background check policies for temporary staff. They can designate specific adults to supervise children during large events. They can be aware of their surroundings in ways that don't interfere with enjoying the celebration but do provide an extra layer of protection. As the evening drew to a close and Detective Martinez finished gathering her final notes, I found myself reflecting on how dramatically this day had unfolded. Different from what I expected when I woke up this morning. I started the day thinking about Kevin's happiness, about welcoming Samantha into our family, about celebrating new beginnings and the hope that comes with second chances at love. I never imagined I would end the day dealing with predatory behavior, police investigations, the kind of adult evil that targets innocent children. But I also never imagined how proud I would be of Tyler's courage, how effectively law enforcement would handle the situation, how grateful I would feel for the community of people who rallied to protect a child they barely knew. Detective Martinez shook my hand and reminded me once more to call if I had questions or concerns over the next few days. Michelle, the wedding coordinator, approached to make sure I knew the venue would be reviewing all their staffing protocols and background check procedures. To prevent this type of incident from happening again, Robert, the security guard, gave me his card and told me Tyler should be commended for his quick thinking and mature response to a very adult problem. As these professionals dispersed back to their regular duties, I walked across the reception hall to collect Tyler from Lisa. She had done such a wonderful job keeping him entertained and emotionally stable throughout this entire ordeal. Ready to head home, sweetheart? I asked Tyler. He nodded enthusiastically. Probably more than ready to leave this venue and return to the familiar comfort of my Mission Viejo house, where we could process everything that had happened in privacy and safety. Lisa hugged both of us and promised to call tomorrow to check on how Tyler was doing. demonstrating the kind of family support system that makes challenging situations more manageable. As we walked out to my car, Tyler slipped his small hand into mine. Looked up at me with those expressive brown eyes that had seen too much today, but had also learned important lessons about trust, courage, and the power of speaking up when something isn't right. "Grandma Dorothy," he said as I was buckling his seatbelt, "I'm glad I told you about the phone instead of keeping it secret or trying to figure out what to do by myself." The maturity in his voice broke my heart and filled me with pride at the same time. "You made exactly the right choice, Tyler. Adults should handle adult problems. Children should never have to deal with scary or confusing situations alone. You were very brave today. I'm so proud of how you handled everything." As we drove through the familiar streets of Orange County, past shopping centers and restaurants and neighborhoods that had been the backdrop of our family's life for decades, Tyler asked the questions I'd been expecting and dreading. Will the bad man go to jail? Will he try to hurt other kids? Will I have to see him again? I answered each question as honestly and age-appropriately as I could, explaining that police had arrested Marcus Webb, that he wouldn't be able to hurt other children because he'd be in prison, that Tyler might need to talk to some nice police officers who specialize in helping children, but that he'd never have to see Marcus Webb again. "What will we tell Daddy about what happened at his wedding?" Tyler asked. I could hear in his voice that he was worried about disrupting Kevin's happiness, causing problems for the new marriage. "We'll tell Daddy the truth," I said firmly. "That you were very observant and very brave. That you did exactly what children should do when they encounter adult problems. That police handled everything properly so his wedding day wasn't ruined. Daddy is going to be very proud of you. Just like I am." When we arrived at my house, I made Tyler a cup of hot chocolate. We sat together on my living room couch. The same couch where we've had countless conversations over the years about school, friends, divorced parents. All the other challenges that come with growing up in a complicated world. "Tyler," I said, choosing my words carefully because I knew this conversation would stay with him for years to come. "Today you learned that there are some adults in the world who make very bad choices. Choices that can hurt children if we're not careful and observant. But you also learn that when children are smart and brave enough to tell trusted adults about problems, those trusted adults will move heaven and earth to keep you safe." He nodded solemnly, processing this information with a kind of seriousness that reminded me how much he'd had to grow up since his parents' divorce. "You also learn that our family and our community are full of people who care about protecting children. People like Aunt Lisa, and Detective Martinez, and even the security guard at the wedding venue. When something scary happens, you're never alone as long as you're willing to ask for help from the right people." As we sat together in the comfortable silence of my living room, surrounded by family photos and familiar objects that represent decades of love and stability, I thought about how this experience would become part of Tyler's story. Part of the lessons that shape how he navigates the world as he grows into adolescence and eventually adulthood. Tomorrow, Kevin and Samantha would start their honeymoon. Tyler would return to his regular routine of school and friends and normal activities that fill a 7-year-old's life. We'd have follow-up conversations with police officers and possibly with counselors. But we'd also have our usual Sunday church service, our weekly grocery shopping trips, our afternoon walks along Newport Beach Pier. All the other rituals that anchor our family life in this corner of Orange County we've called home for so many years. As I tucked Tyler into the guest room bed where he stays when he visits me, he looked up at me with those trusting brown eyes. "Thank you for believing me today, Grandma Dorothy. Thank you for taking care of the scary phone and making sure other kids won't have to see those bad pictures." In that moment, I realized that despite everything difficult about today, Tyler and I had both learned something precious about trust, communication, and the strength that comes from facing challenges together with courage and love. The investigation would continue. There would be court proceedings and interviews and all the legal machinery that follows when someone violates laws designed to protect children, but the most important work had already been done. A child had been protected. A predator had been stopped. A family had weathered a crisis together. And a little boy had learned that the adults in his life would always listen when he needed to tell them something important. "Sweet dreams, Tyler," I whispered as I turned off his bedroom light. "Tomorrow is a new day. And you're going to be just fine." As I settled into my own bed that night, I found myself thinking about Kevin and Samantha. probably settling into their honeymoon suite somewhere, blissfully unaware of how close their perfect day had come to being something very different. I thought about Marcus Webb, sitting in a jail cell, finally facing consequences for his actions. I thought about all the other children who might be safer now because Tyler had found the courage to speak up. But mostly, I thought about my grandson. About his quick thinking and his trust in me. About the conversation we'd had on my couch about good adults and bad adults and the importance of speaking up when something doesn't feel right. 7 years old, and he'd already learned one of life's most important lessons. That silence in the face of wrongdoing isn't golden. That speaking up, even when you're scared, even when you're not sure anyone will believe you, can change everything. As I drifted off to sleep, I whispered a prayer of gratitude. For Tyler's safety. For the professionals who had handled the situation so well. For the family and friends who had rallied around us. For the reminder that even in a world where predators exist, there are always more good people than bad people. More protectors than predators. More helpers than those who seek to harm. And sometimes, just sometimes, the good people win. The next morning, I woke up early as usual. Made coffee and sat on my back patio, watching the sun come up over Orange County. Thinking about everything that had happened and everything that still needed to happen. Tyler slept in until almost 9, which was unusual for him. But I figured he'd earned the extra rest after everything he'd been through. When he finally wandered into the kitchen in his pajamas, hair sticking up in all directions, he looked like a normal 7-year-old again. Not the miniature detective who'd uncovered a predator's scheme. Not the brave witness who'd helped law enforcement catch a criminal. Just a sleepy boy who wanted pancakes for breakfast. "Good morning, sweetheart," I said, giving him a hug that lasted a little longer than usual. "How did you sleep?" "Pretty good," he said, climbing onto his favorite stool at my kitchen counter. "I had some weird dreams, but not scary ones. Just weird." I made his pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse, the way I'd been doing since he was tiny. We ate breakfast together while I explained what would happen over the next few days. Detective Martinez would call to set up the interview. We'd tell his dad everything when Kevin and Samantha got back from their honeymoon. We might meet with a counselor just to make sure he was processing everything okay. "Will I be in trouble for looking at the bad pictures on the phone?" he asked, and my heart just broke all over again. "Tyler, honey, you didn't look at bad pictures on purpose. You saw something by accident when you were tying your shoe. That's completely different. Nobody is upset with you. Everyone is proud of you for telling me right away instead of keeping it secret." He seemed satisfied with this explanation and went back to eating his pancakes. But I could tell he was still thinking about everything that had happened. After breakfast, we decided to take a walk down to the Newport Pier like we do most Sunday mornings. The familiar routine seemed like exactly what we both needed. Normal activities in normal places doing normal things. As we walked along the sand, Tyler collected shells and I collected my thoughts about how to handle the conversation with Kevin when he got back. How much detail to share. How to frame it so Kevin understood the seriousness without being overwhelmed by guilt that had happened at his wedding. The pier was busy with its usual Sunday crowd. Families fishing off the end. Joggers getting their morning exercise. Couples walking hand in hand. All of them living their normal lives, unaware that a little boy walking among them had helped catch a predator less than 24 hours ago. "Grandma," Tyler said as we sat on our favorite bench overlooking the water, "do you think there are other bad people like that man at other parties and weddings?" It was such a mature question. Such a perceptive concern. I chose my words carefully. "There might be, sweetheart. That's why it's so important that children like you know how to recognize when something doesn't feel right. And that you can always tell trusted adults about anything that makes you uncomfortable. You don't have to figure out scary things by yourself." He nodded seriously. Then asked, "Who are my trusted adults?" We spent the next few minutes making a list. Me, his dad, Aunt Lisa, his mom Jennifer, his teachers at school, the pastor at our church. Anyone in uniform like police officers or firefighters. I explained that trusted adults are people who listen when children have problems. Who believe children when they report something wrong. Who take action to keep children safe instead of telling them to ignore problems or keep secrets. As we walked back home, Tyler seemed lighter somehow. Like naming his support system had made him feel more secure. Like understanding that he wasn't alone in the world had given him confidence to face whatever came next. The phone was ringing when we got back to my house. Detective Martinez, checking in to see how Tyler was doing and to schedule the formal interview for Tuesday afternoon. She assured me again that it would be brief and child-friendly. That Tyler's courage had been instrumental in catching someone who might have victimized many other children. "Will you tell him something for me?" she asked. "Tell him that police officers across the country are going to hear about what he did. How he helped protect other kids by speaking up. He's a real hero." I promised to pass along the message. After I hung up, Tyler asked who had called. When I told him what Detective Martinez had said about being a hero, his face lit up with the biggest smile I'd seen since before this whole ordeal began. "Really? Other police officers are going to know about what I did?" "Really," I confirmed. "What you did was very important, Tyler. You helped catch a bad person who was trying to hurt children. That makes you pretty special." The rest of Sunday passed quietly. We went to church, where I said extra prayers of gratitude during the service. We stopped by Trader Joe's for groceries, where Tyler helped me pick out ingredients for his favorite dinner. We spent the afternoon reading books and working on a puzzle. Normal grandmother-grandson activities that felt precious after coming so close to losing our sense of safety and security. That evening, as I was tucking Tyler into bed again, he looked up at me with those serious brown eyes. "Grandma Dorothy, I'm glad I told you about the phone. Even though it was scary. Even though I wasn't sure what would happen. I'm glad I didn't keep it secret." "I'm glad too, sweetheart. So very glad. You did exactly the right thing, and I'm proud of you every single day." As I turned off his light and headed toward my own bedroom, I reflected on how much had changed in just 24 hours. Yesterday morning, I'd been thinking about wedding flowers and reception music and whether Kevin would be happy with his second chance at love. Tonight, I was thinking about predators and investigations and the incredible resilience of children who face adult problems with courage and wisdom. But some things hadn't changed. Tyler was still safe in my guest room. Our family was still strong and connected. Our community had still rallied to protect one of its youngest members. And I was still grateful, every single day, for the privilege of being Tyler's grandmother. Of being someone he trusted enough to tell his scariest secrets. Of being part of the circle of adults committed to keeping him safe in a world that isn't always as innocent as childhood should be. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Phone calls with lawyers and social workers. Conversations with Kevin about what had happened at his wedding. Meetings with counselors to make sure Tyler processed everything in healthy ways. But tonight, all that mattered was that my grandson was safe. That a predator was in jail. That justice was being served. That a little boy had learned he could trust the adults in his life to believe him, protect him, and fight for him when the world got scary. Sometimes, that's all any of us can ask for. Sometimes, that's everything.